Hey there, hope you're well. DevOps Engineering multiple choice exam. There is no such thing in reality, but if there was, this is what it would look like. I asked AI to help me make this. Let's see what it looks like. And also, these are the questions that you can expect to get, pop quiz style questions in an interview even, although the interviewer won't give you choice A, B, C, D like I'm going to do. Now, I haven't looked at this yet. Let's do this together. See if I can get perfect. Let's see if you can get perfect. And if not, there's areas of improvement that we need to follow up on. So, question 1. Which of the following best describes the concept of IAC, infrastructure as code? A. Manual config of server resources. No way. Automating deployment of apps. Of infra, yeah, not apps. This is more like pipeline, CI/CD. So, managing infra through machine-readable definition files. This is a little bit of a weird way to talk about a configuration file or code. But let's see. D. Using physical servers to host apps. No, it's not. It's got to be C. Managing infra through machine-readable through a definition file. Yeah, it's infrastructure as code. It's almost like configuration as code in my view. So I think it's C. Let's have a look. Answer is C. Explanation. IAC allows infra to be managed and provisioned through code, enabling automation and consistency. Indeed. Question 2. In the CI/CD pipeline, which tool is primarily used for continuous integration? Docker, no, that's container orchestration. Jenkins, that's one CI/CD product, yes. It's Terraform, that's IAC. Kubernetes, no, that's container orchestration. It's going to be B, Jenkins. And yeah, it's primarily used for well, CI and CD as well, actually. So this is explained not particularly well, but you know what? This is actually like a lot of exams and like a lot of interviews. There's no problem with that. It's going to be B, Jenkins. Let's have a look. See what it says. Answer B, Jenkins. Widely used tool for CI, allowing devs and others to automate the process of building and testing code. Indeed. Question 3. What is the primary purpose of a service mesh in a microservices architecture? Is it A, to manage server resources? No. Just to let you know, if you don't know, service mesh is to manage service-to-service communications in in Kubernetes. I don't know about other container orchestration, but yeah, microservices on Kubernetes. So let's see. Manage server resources? No. To facilitate comms between services? This is what I was talking about. It's going to be B. To handle data storage? Nope. To automate deployment? No. It's going to be B. To facilitate comms between services. Let's have a look. The answer is B. To facilitate comms between services. A service mesh provides dedicated infrastructure layer. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd call it that, but yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, it more or less is. It's not IaaS, but it is an infrastructure layer to manage service-to-service comms, ensuring security, especially this, observability and reliability. Yeah. 4. Which of the following tools is specifically designed for container orchestration? Is it Jenkins, GitLab, Docker Swarm, or Ansible? Jenkins, we know, is CI/CD. GitLab is a place to store your code in a repository. It's the vendor. It's not B. Docker Swarm. I think I mentioned already. Docker Swarm is one of many container orchestration, along with like Kubernetes, etc. D. Ansible. No, Ansible is a configuration management solution. You configuration as code and a declarative language, typically YAML files. So container orchestration tool. It's going to be C, Docker Swarm. So let's go down here. Exactly. C, Docker Swarm. Explanation. It's a not sure. Maybe they mean cloud native clustering, an orchestration tool for Docker containers, allowing users to manage a cluster of Docker nodes. Yes, correct. I've never used it actually, but it's you don't hear it so much these days, but some companies still using it. In the context of DevOps, what does shift left refer to? Is it A, moving performance testing to the end of the pipeline? Is it B, doing security testing earlier in the dev process? Is it C, delaying deployments to production? Or is it D, reducing the number of team members involved in development? So, I mean, delaying doesn't sound good, right? Moving testing to the end of the pipeline. That also doesn't sound good. You think it would be better to do that earlier. B, conducting security testing early in the dev process. I happen to know that it's this, and if you think about it, it makes sense. Make testing basically a part of the development process, and a classic example is test-driven development. The traditional way was to just leave it till the end and have the test team take care of all the testing. That's not the right way. The modern way is to have testing earlier in the dev process. And D, reducing the number of team members involved in dev. Well, I mean, I suppose that's a good thing, but that's more about efficiency gains and things like that. I mean, shift left is kind of neutral with regard to how many people you need. I don't really think it affects that. I mean, arguably, it increases the workload in the short term, but in the long term, it should reduce it. So it's going to be B, conducting security testing early in the dev process. Let's have a look. Let's go down here. B, conducting security testing early in the dev process. Exactly. Explanation. Shift left emphasizes the importance of integrating testing and security earlier in the software dev lifecycle. Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with it. It says security testing. I suppose testing is these days highly security minded, but I think shifting left, is that just security testing, or is it also just generally testing for reliability, bugs and things like that? I'm not sure actually, but it's definitely looking at testing and security earlier in the life cycle. 6. Which of the following is a key benefit of using blue-green? Increased dev time. Well, that's not a benefit, right? Improved rollback capability. It's good to have rollback. Higher resource consumption. That's certainly not good. A complicated deployment process. Well, that's also not good. So blue-green, if you don't know, I think if I've got this right, if I remember correctly, it's you have blue and green. They are you deploy to one infra. I don't know if that's the right way to say, but you kind of have simultaneous or alternate infra to deploy, and it'll be like V1 you deploy to the blue, the blue lane, let's call it, and V2 you'll deploy to the green. And when it comes to V3, well, V1 is old, so you now put it back in the blue, and you alternate. Basically, it's an alternating style deployment. And the idea is that it's easy to roll back, because all you do is you flick the switch back to the other site, because you always know that whether you're on blue or green, it's not like blue or green is better or worse. It's just that one of them will always be more recent and one will be the previous version. And if there's a problem when you go to the new, you can always go back to the old. That's the idea of blue-green, and you can flip the switch back and forth. So it's going to be rollback capability that's improved. It's going to be B, because it's easy to roll back. All you do is flip a switch. Let's see here. That's my understanding anyway. Improve rollback capability. Explanation. Blue-green allows quick rollbacks to the previous version. That's it. By maintaining 2 prod environments. Exactly. That's what I meant to say, right? You get it. Question 7. What is the primary role of a config management tool in a DevOps pipeline? Is it to monitor app performance? That doesn't sound right. We talk about managing configuration. To automate provisioning of infra? This sounds more like it. To manage software dependencies? To ensure system configurations are consistent? Interesting. Right. Now, it's not monitoring performance. That's monitoring. Right? Monitoring, which is part of observability. It's got nothing to do with that. And specifically app performance. You also have infra performance, but to monitor app performance, right, you might use Grafana dashboard or something like that. That's nothing to do with configuration management. Let me tell you, configuration management is where you typically are managing the configuration. It doesn't say that in the name of this type of tool. We don't tend to refer to that, but implicitly it usually means managing the config of your infrastructure layer, IaaS, virtual machines typically, right? That's typically what it means. And you can have you can have that automated in a pipeline. So the most common one is Ansible. You have Puppet, Chef, SaltStack, but you can run Ansible in a pipeline. So it's nothing to do with application performance. Automate, that's the pipeline. Provisioning of infra, so you can provision VMs like this. So I think it's B. Software dependencies, got nothing to do with that. That is something completely different. You might use Renovate or Dependabot or something like that. It's got nothing to do with configuration management. To ensure system configs are consistent. Now, I don't know what they mean by system configs. I know what they mean by config. But system can mean anything, right? Configuration management does allow you to be consistent. So, this is a typical exam question where you've got one answer which is on the money, and you've got another answer which is kind of there, but not really. There's a better answer. So for me, it's B. I don't think it's D. Let's have a look. Oh, they think it's D. Okay, well, you know what? I disagree, but anyway. To ensure system configs are consistent, config management tools ensure that configs are maintained consistently. Yes, they do. Across different environments, well, yeah, but the environment is not really quite relevant here. If you wanted to achieve consistency across different environments, you can do that. But if you don't want parity or consistency across your different environments, you can have it different in one environment compared to the next. So I actually disagree with this, but in a way, what the AI has done here is kind of similar to real life, whether it's the exam question setter or whether it is the person in the interview who may not be able to phrase a question properly. This happens in real life. I don't mind. The important thing is we had the discussion, so let's move on. But I'm pretty sure, by the way, in my answer that I gave, I'm pretty sure with my logic. You may disagree, you may want to do your own research to but I'm pretty sure, by the way. So anyway, question 8. Which of the following protocols is commonly used for service discovery in microservices? Interesting. Service discovery. So let's see here. It's not going to be FTP, which is a file transfer protocol, right? That doesn't allow you service discovery. And in microservices, you have the communications protocol typically is going to be HTTP. Okay, so I'm talking about like what you would see in Kubernetes and maybe in other container orchestration. But Kubernetes is commonly used in microservices, container orchestration platform, and out of the box, most people will typically use it with HTTP. Now there are other communication protocols that you can use. This would be the next level to go to, a common one, gRPC. I forget the benefits of this. I think it may be connectionless, but I'm not sure. I forget. But it's a communications protocol, and it might be used for a company that's really operating at some fairly significant scale, and it will have advantages and you're operating at performance here. Like, you don't want the overhead that comes with HTTP, and that's why you might go with this, but there's also other benefits. And I think it's connectionless, but I may be wrong. However, both of these have got nothing to do, especially with service discovery. So I think what they're getting at here is DNS. And if you're running Kubernetes for your microservices, then service discovery is via DNS. So this is a bit more of a harder question compared to the ones we've seen so far. You wouldn't know the answer to this if you hadn't any experience with Kubernetes, I don't think, which is typically used for microservices. So I think it's C, DNS. So this is an interesting question, the hardest question we've had so far, in my opinion, the most challenging one. There you go, DNS. It's often used for service discovery in microservice architectures, allowing services to locate each other dynamically. Dynamically because they're going off name, and behind the name will be the variable IP address. Now, I don't know if this is also used in non-Kubernetes, like Docker Swarm that we saw earlier and other things. Could be, but I don't know. These days, many people go straight into, when they're using microservices, straight into Kubernetes. It used to be in the old days, get used to running Docker and Docker Swarm, and there's another one that I forget the name of. There are some other ones that would be used on a smaller scale in the past. But these days you can run even micro distributions or lightweight distributions of Kubernetes. You don't need to start with something else. You can go straight to Kubernetes And I forget the name of the one that was also used, that you often heard mentioned, as well as Docker Swarm. I forget the name because these days you don't often hear it mentioned. Typically, most people go straight to Kubernetes. Question 9. What does the term immutable infra refer to in DevOps? Is it infra that... Okay, let me tell you. Immutable means it cannot be mutated. And in English, right, in terms of language, to mutate something is to change something. So immutable means you can't change it. So immutable infrastructure means... Well, it doesn't mean that you can't change it, but what it means is, this is more accurate, it's non-changing infrastructure, right? It should not really just change on its own without you specifically specifying that you want to perform a change to your infra. So it means that under normal conditions it won't change. Only if you specify it should change, that it will do. It also means that if some outside event causes it to change, like someone interfering and doing ClickOps and manually changing it, or maybe there's some kind of drift in the configuration for whatever reason, it could happen, right? Unlikely, but it could happen, that it should revert back to whatever your desired state of configuration is that you have specified in your Terraform or Ansible or whatever. So immutable infra should mean, you know, exactly as I mentioned. Let's have a look. Infra that can be modified at any time. Well, that is true, although I don't know if they're getting at it being accidentally modified. Infra that is not changed after deployment. Interesting. Infra that is only accessible to specific users. Well, you would say that as well with IAC. You know, you should have access control. Infra that relies on virtualization. Well, that's not true. Okay, so it's going to be A, B, or C. I'm going to cross out A, modified at any time. I think it's trying to get at the fact that really it should be more at a prescribed time, you know, specifically when you want it to change. So I'm gonna say not A. Not changed after deployment. Well, I don't know if that's true. You know, you want the ability to change it after deployment. So I feel like that's not true. I don't know what they're getting at there. Infra that is only accessible to specific users. You definitely want that, but that's not what immutable is talking about. You know, we're talking about it being non-changing. So I think they're getting at this, that after you deploy it, it shouldn't change. It shouldn't be allowed to change. It should always revert any change. I think it's B that they're getting at. They're not really talking about access control, and D is completely out. And A is, you know, it's not talking about, that's nothing to do with it being immutable. In fact, it's the opposite. So I think it's B. Let's see what they say. B. Yes, B. Not change after deployment. I mean, technically you can change it, but I know what they're getting at. Immutable infra means that servers are, okay, replaced rather than modified, leading to more predictable deployments and easier rollbacks. Okay, that's interesting. I think, you see, they're talking specifically about IaaS here, about infrastructure as a service, like virtual machines. And yeah, you know, in a way that's true. Okay, they're talking really about a specific use case. So let's say you have a virtual machine deployed and you want to modify a tag on the virtual machine. Well, you wouldn't need to replace it then. But on a virtual machine, there aren't that many things that you can modify, and typically you would want to modify the instance type, or maybe the memory on the instance, or something like that. And it is very common for the server to have to be completely replaced, to have to be destroyed and a new one created rather than modified. In fact, often with a server there is no ability to modify it. So I do see what they're getting at here. Not the best phrase question, but we were right anyway, and I do see what they're talking about there. And also there's the argument that you don't want to modify the VM, just outright replace the whole damn thing. It's better, it's more predictable. I was going to say predictable, and I just see that's also what they're saying here as well. So you would have the same if you were using like an image, a custom image, like a Packer image or something like that. You know, then you would want a completely new if you're changing the configuration in the image, you want to completely, you would just deploy the infra, especially if it's in an auto-scaling group or Azure scale set or whatever you want to call it. So let's have a look. Question 10. Which monitoring method focuses on identifying trends and anomalies over time? Monitoring. Trends and anomalies over time. Interesting. Logs are not really associated with monitoring, really. You are really, if you're just keeping logs and retaining logs, and you can query them, it's not, and you can query logs and have them become, create a monitor and even alerts based on that, but it's not something you would typically do. You would typically try to do monitoring using metrics endpoint. So I'm going to say not C for trends and anomalies as part of monitoring over time. Yeah, synthetic. I don't know what that is, to be honest. So then we're left with real time versus historical. Real time is more about, does it go over this threshold, and if so, we want it to alert or something like that. So I'm going to say it's probably historical monitoring, because we're talking about trends, and trends come from history, and anomalies also come from a large data set. So I'm going to say D, historical monitoring, if you want trends and anomalies over time. Let's have a look what it says here. D, indeed, historical. Analyzes past data, indeed. Identify trends and anomalies, and to facilitate better decision making. So better decision making is kind of what you whenever you hear the word, by the way, insights, this is kind of like management speak for better decision making based on trends, just to let you know if you ever hear the word insights. So that's answer D. Right. 11. In DevOps concept, what does the acronym CAP stand for? Now you either know this or you don't know it, okay? In the CAP theorem. Is it consistency, availability, partition tolerance? Is it centralization, access performance? Is it configuration, automation, provisioning? Is it continuous, agile, or predictable? And you hear this often in system design interviews. You either know this or you don't know this. There's no way that you can really just work this out by looking at it. I mean, you could say that some of these sort of don't belong with each other, but you're not really going to know unless you know it. And I'll just tell you, it's going to be consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. And you typically hear about this when it comes to databases. Okay, the CAP theorem is there. And the CAP theorem, have a look at it if you don't know what it is. It's all about a trade-off. The idea is that you can't achieve all three. You'll never achieve a perfect triad of all three. You're always going to have some kind of trade-off, one versus another. So let's see what it says here. It should be the answer is A. And the answer is indeed A. And the CAP theorem states that in a distributed data store, so I mentioned databases, it is impossible to achieve all three guarantees simultaneously, which is a better way of saying what I just said. So look it up if you don't know what that is. You've never come across it. I've never been asked that in an interview, but every DevOps engineer should know what that is. It's very important in application design. Question 12. What is the purpose of a canary release in a software deployment? So if you don't know what that is, a canary release, the idea of a canary is a canary in a coal mine. So miners used to take a canary down into a coal mine. The idea was, if there was toxic gas that could kill them, it's going to kill the little bird before it kills any miner. So if the canary starts falling sick and even dies, it means get the hell out of the mine immediately, right? So what is it? To test the entire app at once. That doesn't sound like it. To deploy new features to all users simultaneously. That also doesn't sound like it. Again, it sounds like a risk, right? All users. To gradually roll changes out to a small subset of users. Or to roll back changes immediately after deployment, so kind of deploy it, and if the shit hits the fan, then quickly roll it back. I mean, that's a good idea, right? But the answer is C. Gradually roll out to a small subset of users. You test it on a small subset; they are the canary, and that reduces your blast radius. And even if there's huge problems for that small subset of users, you've reduced the blast radius. It hasn't upset all of your users. It's only upset a few of them, and you can therefore quickly roll it back. So the answer, canary release, is C. Let's have a look. This is important in DevOps. Absolutely. because you'll need to know this for pipelines. Pipelines are for deploying applications at the end of the day. C, gradually roll out changes to a small subset of users. A canary release allows new features tested on a small group before wider deployment, minimizing risk. Indeed. Question 30. Which of the following tools primarily used for infra provisioning? Is it Ansible, Nagios, Grafana, or Git? Right, Ansible is configuration management, typically for infra. So it's going to be A. I know it already. B, Nagios is, if you don't know what it is, it's not used so much now. You might use it more if you're in the on-prem world. It is infrastructure monitoring. Grafana is a dashboard software for open source cloud native monitoring. So it's not this. It's not provisioning infra. And Git is SCM, source control management, and it's the most common one now. And there are other ones like SVN, but Git has got nothing to do with infrastructure provisioning. It's all about source code versioning. So the answer is going to be A. Let's have a look. Answer is Ansible, popular tool for automating infra provisioning and configuration management. Yeah, indeed. Well, to be honest, it's just called a configuration management tool, but with it you can provision your infrastructure, and you can also configure it as well. So let's have a look. Question 14, and you'll often use Terraform these days, to be honest, but it can still be used. It's usually used to configure your infrastructure on the Linux OS or whatever. Question 40, what's the significance of 12-factor app methodology? Okay. This is like a new methodology that's kind of like for how to build a microservice architecture. There are 12 different factors that you should take into account. So it defines how to scale apps horizontally. Maybe. Not sure if it does or not. Provides guidelines for building scalable, that's a spelling mistake, and maintainable web apps. Yes, I believe this is the case. Best practice for DB management. No, it's not true. Focuses on server management techniques. Not true. So it's going to be A or B, and yeah, if I go back to A, right, it's kind of partially true in terms of scalability, but that's not really what it's all about, and it doesn't really cover everything. This kind of looks like it's talking about infra. It's nothing to do with that. It's going to be B. Provides guidelines for building scalable and maintainable web apps. So 12-factor app methodology is B. Indeed, it's B. Provides guidelines for building scalable and maintainable web apps. Methodology. Principles for building SaaS apps that can scale effectively. Question 15. We've got 5 more. 14 down. We've got 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We've got 6 more. Which of the following is key characteristic of a microservice architecture? Monolith. No, that's the opposite. Tight coupling of components. Hell no. We want light coupling, or ideally decoupling. Tight coupling comes in the monolithic. Independent deployment of services. Yes, we don't want dependence between services. We want independent. So that's true. Single database for all services. Well, it's kind of irrelevant. You might think it's a common misconception that, for example, if you need, it's a common misconception that you need a separate database for each service that needs a database. It's not true. And you might think, well, that's tight coupling, right? But in reality, you don't need to go to that level of decoupling and independence, that you can actually have a single database for all of your services. It only makes sense to break it up when you need to. For example, completely different requirements. So this is a kind of trick answer here. Ignore that. It's going to be this one here. C, independent deployment of services is a key characteristic of a microservice architecture, MSA. It's not D. The answer is C, independent deployment of services. Microsoft allows independent deployment, enabling more agile development scaling. Indeed. 16. In the context of DevOps, what is pipeline as code? Okay. Is it a graphical representation of a deployment process? No, because it's code. I mean, your CI/CD solution might give you that. Is it a way to define CI/CD using code? Yes, it is. That's exactly what it is. It is pipeline as code. Is it a method of manual deploy of applications? No. I mean, you might have a manual gate, or you may want to click a button, but ideally not. It's not really about manual deployment. Is it a technique for measuring performance? Nothing to do with that. It is B, a way to define CI/CD as code. So 16 is B. Indeed, pipeline as code is defining CI/CD process in code, and because of that you can have version control of your code and also easier collaboration. Indeed. 17. What is the purpose of a GitOps approach in DevOps? Okay, and I know there is some confusion about this. I'm interested to know if the AI got confused as well. To manage server configs. By the way, I'll tell you here, if you don't know what GitOps is, right, there's a clue in the word, right? There's Git. And the ops part is not really that much of a clue, but there is Git. It's to do with source code. I'll tell you what it is. GitOps is having a single source of truth, which is your source code, which sits typically in a repository that is a Git type repository, right? So it's a source code as a single source of truth for your application deployment, and it's typically used with Kubernetes, two products, Argo CD and Flux, which are the most popular products, and it's typically used to link your source code sitting in your Git repo, which acts as a single source of truth for the deployment of your application. So to describe your Kubernetes state, which are obviously the manifest, the YAML, which describe the resources, Kubernetes resources such as deployment, services, stuff like that. So, and always your repo, your source code will be the single source of truth. So, but some people believe that it just means controlling anything from your source code, even VMs, even non-application infrastructure. I don't happen to believe that's true. So let's see what it says here. Manage server configs. No. To use Git repos as a source of truth for infra. Yes, if it means like app infra, right? If it means Kubernetes resources, which are a kind of abstraction of, it's not IaaS, it's not normal infrastructure as a service. It's kind of like the containerized abstraction in a containerized container orchestration layer. So this is true. B. C. To automate app testing. Nothing to do with testing, especially. D. To monitor application. No, nothing to do with monitoring. It's B. To use Git repos as a source of truth for infra. Yes. But as I mentioned, in my opinion, it really is specifically to do with the new paradigm of having application infrastructure described as Kubernetes resources. It's not really to do with VMs and stuff like that. So the answer to this question, what is GitOps? It should be B. Let's have a look. B. Yes, to use Git repos as a source of truth for infra. GitOps leverages Git as a single source of truth for managing infra and application deployments. Yeah, okay. I mean, in Kubernetes, Kubernetes resources are kind of one and the same thing. For infra and app deployment, they kind of merge together. I mean, you can even create virtual machines from Kubernetes resources these days, right? Because it's a platform now, and you can do everything. So really, GitOps and platform management are interlinked very much, and that this becomes a kind of mix, infra and app deployment. That's what's kind of cool about platform management. Question 18. Which of the following tools is best suited for monitoring and visualizing logs? Okay. Is it Prometheus? ELK Stack, Jenkins, or Terraform? Okay. Terraform is infrastructure as code. Let's get rid of that. Jenkins is CI/CD pipeline. So, monitoring and visualizing logs. Now, visualizing just means that there's a UI, but often when we talk about visualizing in an observability stack, we tend to talk about things like Grafana, right, rather than Prometheus. But you often find Grafana and Prometheus together, right? So yeah, Prometheus does have a UI as well, although I think most people don't use it as much as Grafana. So, Prometheus can be a UI for monitoring and being for visualizing monitoring, right? I don't really see these as two different things, monitoring and visualizing. They're kind of linked. I think you can view the logs from there. But yeah, I don't really like the way it considers monitoring and visualizing to be kind of separate. Prometheus is definitely monitoring. And I think you have visibility of your logs from there. And you can obviously visualize them. So I'll kind of go with A. Now, ELK stack is basically a different stack to Prometheus. So it's kind of weird how we got two different stacks here. Of course, the AI created this question, and you can expect it to not be perfect, and you can expect an interviewer to be confused a little bit as well, and it could be a trick question in some ways. So that's okay. ELK stack has, Elasticsearch is a kind of, it's really a search engine. Logstash is a kind of let's call it a space to store logs, to index them in particular. I think the Elasticsearch is that part, but Logstash is definitely I think it's kind of like a storage space for logs, if I remember correctly. And Kibana is something completely different, which I forget what that is. I totally forget. It's a bit weird, ELK, in the way that it's defined. So I wouldn't say this is especially all to do with logs. It's an entire monitoring / observability stack. I'm going to go with even though it mentions logs, I'm going to go with A, Prometheus, but I'm not sure because the question's a bit weird the way they've asked it. Let's see what it says. Oh, and they said ELK. Okay. Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana, indeed. Okay, so log aggregation, which I think is Logstash. Don't take my word for it. Okay, visualization. Indeed, Kibana is visualization. I remember now. Kibana is the visualization engine. ELK works without Grafana, although it's often coupled with Grafana. So I'm pretty sure Kibana is the default built-in visualization that you get in this stack. Monitoring as well. I'm not sure which is which. It's a bit complicated. I recommend that you go look at this, go look at the website for Elastic Stack, and there should be a definition of those three things. I'm not going to explore that now because we're in the middle of these questions. I don't want to distract you. Make sure you know for your interview, because I've forgotten, and it's very easy to forget because it's a little bit weird, but what is the exact definition of Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana? I'm not even sure it's these three things. Go check that out. That is a follow-up point for you and for me. Nothing wrong with that. Nobody's perfect, right? Question 19. What is the main advantage of using containerization DevOps? Well, increased cost is not an advantage. Enhanced security is. Let's come back to that. Complexity in deployment. Maybe you want that complexity. I don't think that's really what containers are about. Dependency in physical hardware. Well, you don't have that. You have a removed dependency. You have an abstraction away from the physical hardware. Okay? Arguably, you have an abstraction away even from the operating system. Although there is still that there, but in a way less, because all the containers share the underlying operating system. So I think it's going to be this: enhanced security through isolation. Indeed, the more abstracted away you become, the less complex your environment for your service becomes. Then in theory you have enhanced security. You don't have all the let's call it not the holes, but the vulnerabilities, hopefully, from your underlying operating system. But there are other things there are new security holes that you get as well through containerization as well, just to let you know. But definitely your workloads, your services are isolated from each other, and if it's talking about isolation, that is enhanced security. But I would argue it is easy to go to containerization and actually end up with not so, possibly reduced security because you haven't taken care of that. So isolation, enhanced security, I'm going to go with B as a result of containerization. Let's see. And the answer is yes. Isolated environments for apps, enhancing security, and this is what I was talking about, reducing conflicts between services. So the services, the workloads are better isolated. So yeah, I'm going to go with that. Last question, question 10. Stay with me. Which of the following best describe Agile in the context of DevOps? A strict framework for project management. It's nothing to do with project management, and I would argue it's not particularly strict. Set of principles for iterative development and collaboration. This sounds more like it. Methodology focused solely on testing. No, it's not just testing. Centralized approach to software development. Well, it is an approach to software dev, but it's not really centralized. It is in the clue is in the name. It is iterative development, and it's all about collaborating as well. And it's a set of principles. So it's not strict, but you should try to adhere to them. They're not there for no reason, right? That you should try to adhere to your principles, but they're not as strict as this framework implies here, and it's not centralized. So I'm going to go with B. Agile is principles for iterative development and collab. Let's see here. And the answer is yes, it's a set of principles. Agile emphasize iterative collaboration, flexibility. I think I mentioned that in the software dev process. So there we go. That was this multi-choice exam that I got the AI to help create. And obviously AI is not perfect, and it created this kind of weird thing, but it gave us really a lot of great points for discussion. And this is good practice for any interview that you've got coming up. So I hope you really enjoyed this. Give it a thumbs up if you did. I don't know if you made it to the end, but anyway, check out the other videos and give it a thumbs up. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.